In 1993, three engineers met at a Denny's diner in San Jose with $40,000 and an idea. One of them, a 30-year-old who had worked there as a dishwasher, sketched out a plan to build a chip for a market that barely existed. Nobody thought it would work. 3 years later, it looked like nobody was wrong. Their first product had failed. Half the staff was gone. The cash was almost out. They were 30 days from shutting the doors forever. But those three engineers didn't just survive. They went on to build the engine that powers artificial intelligence and became the first company in history to reach a $5 trillion market cap. This is how they did it.
To understand how NVIDIA got here, you first need to understand the man who built it. Jensen Huang was born in Taiwan in 1963. When he was 5, his family moved to Thailand. When he was 9, his parents made a decision that would shape everything that came after. They sent Jensen and his brother to America, alone, because they wanted their kids to grow up in the United States but couldn't afford to bring the whole family at once. The school they enrolled him in was supposed to be a prestigious prep school in Kentucky. It turned out to be a reform school. His first roommate was a 17-year-old who had just gotten out of prison. Most kids don't come out of that experience with a burning desire to build a technology company. Jensen did. His family eventually settled in Oregon. And at 15 years old, Jensen Huang got his first job. Not at a tech firm. Not at a lab. At a Denny's, working the graveyard shift as a dishwasher, then a busboy, then a waiter. He's talked about those years more than you might expect from someone who runs a $5 trillion company. He says working through the chaos of a busy diner, the pressure, the pace, the stakes of a packed rush hour, taught him something that no engineering degree ever could. That his best work happens when the pressure is highest. That when most people freeze, he gets sharper. He'd need that quality more than once. After Denny's, he excelled academically, graduated high school at 16, earned an electrical engineering degree from Oregon State, and later completed a master's at Stanford, studying evenings and weekends while working full-time as a chip designer. By his early 30s, he was running his own division at LSI Logic, one of Silicon Valley's leading semiconductor firms. By any measure, he had already made it. Then he walked away from all of it to start a company. At a Denny's. The same chain where he had once washed dishes was now where he sat across from two fellow engineers, Chris Malachowski and Curtis Preen, drinking cheap coffee and sketching out an idea. He chose Denny's because it was quieter than home, but there was probably something poetic about it too. The place where he had started at the bottom was now where he was betting on the top. Now, what exactly were they trying to build? At the time, computers processed everything through a single chip called the CPU, the Central Processing Unit. The CPU handled every task sequentially, one calculation at a time. That worked fine for most things. But rendering 3D graphics, the kind needed for video games, required millions of calculations running simultaneously. The CPU was never designed for that. It was too slow, too bottlenecked. Jensen and his company founders saw the gap. Their idea was to build a dedicated chip, one designed specifically to handle the parallel, math-heavy demands of 3D graphics. A chip that would take that burden off the CPU entirely and do it faster than anything that existed. They called it a graphics processing unit. A GPU. At the time, nobody was calling it that. Nobody was even sure the market existed. PC gaming was still a niche hobby. 3D graphics on a home computer was more of a promise than a reality. But Jensen was convinced that was about to change, and that whoever built the right chip at the right moment would own the market. What he didn't know yet was that the chip he was designing for video games would one day become the most important piece of hardware in the history of artificial intelligence. But we'll get there.
NVIDIA launched in 1993 with $40,000, a small office in Santa Clara, and a contract with Sega to build a 3D graphics chip for their next gaming console. It wasn't a glamorous start, but it was a start. They raised $2 million from Sequoia Capital, one of Silicon Valley's most respected venture firms, and got to work. The team was small, the timeline was aggressive, and the pressure was immediate. In the early 1990s, there were nearly 90 graphics chip startups all racing toward the same market. NVIDIA was just one of them. Their first chip was called the NV1. It was technically impressive, packed with features their competitors didn't have. But it had a problem, a fundamental one. NVIDIA had designed it to render 3D graphics using quadrilaterals, four-sided shapes. The rest of the industry was moving toward triangles. And when Microsoft announced that their new graphics software would only support triangles, the NV1 was dead on arrival. Sega walked away from the contract. Revenue dried up. The team that had grown to 100 people suddenly had no product to sell. Jensen Huang made a decision that would define NVIDIA's culture forever. He laid off more than half the company, cutting from 100 employees down to 40, and gave the survivors one mission: build a new chip from scratch in 9 months. Not the 2 years a chip like this would normally take. 9 months, because that was all the runway they had. To pull it off, they did something almost unheard of at the time. Instead of building physical prototypes to test their designs, the standard approach, they invested a third of their remaining cash in emulation software. Software that could simulate the chip digitally before a single piece of hardware was manufactured. It ran at 1 frame every 30 seconds. It was painfully slow, but it allowed them to iterate faster than any competitor could, to find the mistakes before they became expensive, to move at a speed the industry had never seen. By August 1997, with 1 month of payroll left in the bank, NVIDIA shipped the RIVA 128. It sold 1 million units in 4 months. The company didn't just survive, it found its footing. The RIVA 128 proved there was a real market for dedicated graphics chips, and that NVIDIA could build them better and faster than anyone else. Revenue started flowing. The team started growing again. And Jensen Huang, who had spent the previous year opening every meeting with a reminder that they were 30 days from extinction, now had something new to work with. Momentum. They used it. In 1999, NVIDIA released the GeForce 256, and with it, coined a term that would change the industry forever. They called it a GPU, a graphics processing unit. The GeForce 256 didn't just render graphics faster than anything before it. It moved an entire category of computation off the CPU and onto a dedicated chip, making games smoother, more detailed, and more immersive than anything consumers had seen on a home computer. The market responded. That same year, NVIDIA went public on the NASDAQ at $12 a share. The gaming industry, the market that barely existed when 3 engineers sketched it out on a Denny's napkin 6 years earlier, was now very real, and NVIDIA was at the center of it. By 2001, they had secured a deal to power the graphics in Microsoft's original Xbox, one of the most anticipated gaming consoles ever made. The same year, they joined the S&P 500. The startup that had been 30 days from going out of business was now one of the most recognized names in consumer technology. But Jensen Huang wasn't thinking about gaming anymore. He was thinking about something much bigger. By the early 2000s, NVIDIA was a legitimate success story. Gaming revenue was growing. The GeForce brand was everywhere. They had powered the Xbox, joined the S&P 500, and built a reputation as the best graphics chip company in the world. Most CEOs would have stayed in that lane. Jensen Huang didn't. He had noticed something that nobody else in the industry was paying attention to. The same parallel computing power that made GPUs great at rendering graphics, the ability to run millions of calculations simultaneously, could theoretically be applied to almost any complex mathematical problem. Scientific simulations, weather modeling, oil exploration, and eventually, something that was still mostly theoretical in the early 2000s, artificial intelligence. The problem was that GPUs weren't designed to be programmed that way. They were built for graphics. If a scientist or researcher wanted to use one for something else, there was no easy way to do it. The software bridge didn't exist. Jensen decided to build it. In 2006, NVIDIA launched CUDA, Compute Unified Device Architecture, a software platform that opened up the parallel processing power of NVIDIA GPUs to anyone who wanted to use it. Scientists, researchers, developers. For the first time, you didn't need to be a graphics programmer to harness what a GPU could do. You just needed CUDA. Wall Street hated it. NVIDIA's valuation dropped from $12 billion to somewhere between $2 and $3 billion. The company had effectively doubled the cost of building its chips to include this new software layer, and the market saw no reason for it. CUDA downloads were slow. Revenue impact was minimal, and for nearly a decade, investors questioned whether Jensen Huang had lost the plot. He hadn't, he was just early. In 2012, something happened that changed everything. Two researchers at the University of Toronto, Alex Krzyzewski and Ilya Sutskever, working under AI pioneer Geoffrey Hinton, entered an annual image recognition competition called ImageNet. They built a neural network called AlexNet and trained it using just 2 NVIDIA GPUs running on CUDA. The results weren't just good, they were shocking. AlexNet outperformed every other entry by a margin so wide that the scientific community didn't know what to make of it. It correctly identified images at a level that had never been seen before. The deep learning era had begun, and NVIDIA's chips were the engine behind it. Suddenly, the AI research community, which had been quietly experimenting with GPUs for years, had proof that this approach worked at scale. Universities, research labs, and tech companies started buying NVIDIA hardware. CUDA downloads accelerated. The $12 billion bet that Wall Street had punished for 6 years was starting to look like one of the shrewdest investments in the history of the technology industry. But Jensen wasn't done pivoting. In 2016, he walked into a startup's office and personally hand-delivered a computer. The startup was OpenAI, then a small, largely unknown research lab with ambitious ideas about artificial intelligence. The computer was the DGX-1, NVIDIA's first purpose-built AI supercomputer, with a processing power of 250 conventional servers packed into a single box. Jensen had spent years and billions building it. When he announced it to the market, he had not a single purchase order. Nobody wanted it. Elon Musk did. Musk, who had co-founded OpenAI the previous year, took the machine. Jensen signed it with a marker. To Elon and the OpenAI team, to the future of computing and humanity. The DGX-1 accelerated OpenAI's research experiments by weeks, allowing them to run experiments that were previously impossible due to computing constraints. Much of that work became the foundation of the generative AI tools that would eventually change the world. 6 years later, OpenAI launched ChatGPT. And the moment it did, every technology company on the planet had the same realization at the same time. They needed to build AI. Building AI required GPUs. And there was really only one company that had spent 30 years building the hardware, the software, and the ecosystem to make that possible. NVIDIA. By 2022, the AI gold rush had begun, and NVIDIA had the only picks and shovels in town. When ChatGPT launched in November 2022, it became the fastest-growing consumer application in history. 1 million users in 5 days, 100 million in 2 months. Overnight, artificial intelligence went from a research topic to a global obsession, and every major technology company in the world, Google, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, Tesla, scrambled to build their own AI systems as fast as humanly possible. There was just one problem. They all needed the same thing, NVIDIA chips. And there weren't enough of them. The demand was unlike anything the semiconductor industry had ever seen. Tech giants were placing orders worth billions of dollars. Startups were paying premiums just to get access to a handful of GPUs. At one point, Larry Ellison of Oracle and Elon Musk reportedly spent an entire sushi dinner in Palo Alto begging Jensen Huang for chip allocations. 2 of the wealthiest men on the planet. Begging for access to a product made by a company that had nearly gone bankrupt 30 years earlier. Jensen Huang had become, almost overnight, the most powerful man in technology. The numbers tell the story clearly. In fiscal year 2024, NVIDIA posted $60.9 billion in revenue, up 126% from the year before. In fiscal year 2025, that number jumped to $130.5 billion. Data center revenue alone, the chips powering AI training and inference around the world, hit $115 billion. A business that had generated almost no data center revenue a decade earlier was now the largest and fastest-growing segment in the company by an almost incomprehensible margin. In October 2025, NVIDIA crossed a threshold no company had ever reached, a $5 trillion market cap, more than the GDP of Japan, more than Google and Amazon combined. The first company in the history of capitalism to hit that number. But what makes NVIDIA's position truly extraordinary isn't just the revenue or the market cap. It's the moat. CUDA, the software platform that Wall Street punished them for building in 2006, now has over 5 million developers worldwide. It is deeply integrated into every major AI framework on the planet. PyTorch, TensorFlow, JAX, Hugging Face. Every tool that AI researchers and engineers use daily is built on top of NVIDIA's software ecosystem. Switching to a competitor's chip doesn't just mean buying different hardware. It means rewriting software at every layer of the stack. For most companies, that's not a trade-off they're willing to make. That's not a product advantage. That's a platform lock-in that took 30 years to build. And at the center of it all is Jensen Huang, who has been CEO of NVIDIA for over 32 years. In an industry where the average tenure of a technology CEO is measured in single digits, that kind of continuity is almost unheard of. He has led this company through near bankruptcy, through a decade of Wall Street skepticism, through the gaming boom, through the AI revolution, and he is still the one setting the vision. The dishwasher from Denny's is now worth over $100 billion. NVIDIA's story isn't just a business case study. It's a masterclass in how to build something that lasts. Here are the lessons every entrepreneur, investor, and professional can take from 30 years of Jensen Huang's playbook. Lesson 1. Survival is a strategy. In 1996, NVIDIA had 30 days of cash left. Jensen Huang cut ruthlessly, focused narrowly, and bet everything on one product. The lesson isn't about resilience, it's about prioritization. When everything is falling apart, the only goal that matters is buying yourself more time. You can't build a $5 trillion company if you're not around for year 4. Lesson 2. Build platforms, not just products. NVIDIA could have stayed in gaming hardware forever. Instead, Jensen spent $12 billion building CUDA, transforming NVIDIA from a hardware vendor into an ecosystem. Today, switching away from NVIDIA doesn't mean buying a different chip. It means rebuilding years of work from scratch. The product gets you in the door. The platform keeps you there. Lesson 3. The best bets look wrong for a long time. CUDA launched in 2006. Wall Street punished them for it. For nearly a decade, it looked like a mistake. Jensen kept investing anyway. The companies that win the next decade are usually investing in something today that the market doesn't understand yet. The question is whether you have the conviction to hold on long enough. Lesson 4. See the market before it exists. In 1993, 3D graphics on a home PC was barely a concept. In 2006, AI was an academic research topic. In 2016, generative AI was science fiction. At every stage, NVIDIA was building for a world that hadn't arrived yet. By the time the AI boom hit in 2022, they didn't need to scramble. They had been ready for 15 years. Lesson 5. Culture reflects the founder. Jensen Huang opened every company meeting for years with the same reminder. We are 30 days from going out of business. Not because it was true, but because he never wanted NVIDIA to forget what it felt like when it was. Culture doesn't come from a values poster on a wall. It comes from the behavior the leader models every single day. And that is the story of NVIDIA. From a Denny's booth in San Jose to the most valuable company on Earth. From 30 days from going out of business to $5 trillion. The lesson above all others is simple. The future belongs to those who build for it before anyone else believes it exists. If you found this breakdown valuable, hit the like button. It helps more people find this channel. And if you want more breakdowns of how the world's most powerful companies were really built, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.